Steve Nash is an 8-time All-Star, a 7-time member of the All-NBA teams, a 2-time MVP, and a first-ballot Hall of Famer. He should, by any measure, be seen as one of the most dominant point guards to ever play the game. But yet, in recent years, many have disrespected Steve Nash. They've called him one of the most undeserving MVPs the league has ever seen. Well, today, guys, I'm here to set the record straight. I'm here to tell you about Steve Nash's incredible, improbable rise to NBA stardom and why he deserves to be seen as one of the all-time greats. So, how's everyone doing? My name is Mike, and let's just jump into this video. Steve Nash is probably the most unlikely MVP in basketball history. Born in South Africa to a father who was a professional soccer player, Steve spent his childhood growing up in Canada, where of course his first loves were hockey and soccer. And because his dad was a former soccer player, you would expect Steve to follow in his father's footsteps, especially because Steve was a dominant soccer player himself. In fact, it wasn't until he was 12 years old that Steve would even begin to play basketball, and he didn't play his first organized game until he was in 8th grade. An insane beginning for a future NBA great when you consider that right now the top 3rd graders in America have national rankings. None of that would matter though, because once Steve found a basketball in his hands, he could never seem to put it down. As an 8th grader, he would tell his mom that he would become an NBA star, and so in an area where basketball was not popular at all, Nash worked his ass off to become the best player that Canada has ever seen. By the time he reached high school, Steve was a Canadian star, and his coach at St. Michael's has said he has never had a player like Steve play for him. Has never seen a player work on his game non-stop like Nash. This work ethic would lead to Nash having an absolutely monster senior season at St. Michael's, where he would lead his team to a provincial championship victory. Still though, no college coaches were interested at all, which meant Steve's coach began to write college coaches letters trying to get him recruited. These letters were an absolute failure. All in all, Steve's coach sent out over 30 letters to different schools ranging from Duke to Arizona to Villanova to it doesn't matter, because every time a letter was sent, another one would return simply saying, "Thanks for reaching out, but there's not a chance we're giving your guy a scholarship." At the time, this seemed like a negative, but Steve would actually keep all of these rejection letters in a shoebox for motivation. He knew that all he needed was a chance, and luckily enough, he would get one. As going off a tip from a friend, Santa Clara coach Dick Davey went to go watch Steve play and could not be more impressed. As Davey remembers, "I was just praying that there were no other college coaches there because I thought we had a real diamond in the rough." So Nash took the only scholarship offer he got, packed his bags, and went to play for Santa Clara, the chip on his shoulder visible from miles away. And it was at Santa Clara that Nash would prove he was legit, as at the time of his arrival, the team had not made the NCAA tournament in 5 years. That would change right away, as a freshman, Nash was named the WCC tournament MVP and would help lead the 15th seeded Broncos to a major upset over the 2nd seeded Arizona Wildcats, a game that saw Nash sink 6 straight free throws to seal the major upset. This would only be the beginning of Nash's storied career at Santa Clara, as this mid-major team had found a true superstar to finally lead them. Again, Nash's growth as a player was fueled by his work ethic, as he rarely left the gym, and when he did, you could find him dribbling a tennis ball around campus to still work on his ball handling. By the time his career was over, Nash had led Santa Clara to 3 NCAA tournament appearances and was already a member of the Canadian national team. Finally, scouts were forced to accept that Steve Nash was the real deal, and so improbably, the Canadian kid that was supposed to play soccer was taken with the 15th pick in the 1996 draft. However, like everything in his career thus far, earning his place in the NBA would be a struggle. As a rookie, Nash would average only 10.5 minutes and 3.3 points per game on a Suns team that had both former All-Star Kevin Johnson and future Hall of Famer Jason Kidd. Just getting serious playing time ahead of these 2 point guards seemed impossible, but Nash refused to let this be his destiny. He remembers, "What did I do? Stayed obsessed, set goals, worked, dreamed, schemed, pushed myself beyond what was normal or expected. I looked at my hero, Isaiah Thomas, and thought to myself, okay, I'm nowhere near the player he is, but if I get better every day for 5 or 10 years, why can't I be as good as him? This success would not come overnight, but Steve would improve. In fact, Nash has since said that one of the greatest achievements in his career was earning minutes on the Suns in his second season, as year 2 saw him take a mini leap to 9 points and 3.5 assists per game in 22 minutes a night. Still though, while he showed some flashes, there was nothing to suggest that Steve Nash was going to be a future All-Star, let alone MVP. The next season he would be traded by the Suns to the Mavericks, but even as a starter, 24-year-old Steve Nash averaged just 8 points and 5.5 assists. It wasn't until year 6 that things finally began to click, as Nash had of course been working non-stop to adjust his game to the NBA. When he first came into the league, he seriously struggled to adjust to the speed and athleticism of the game. But the thing is, while he wasn't the best athlete in a conventional sense, meaning he wasn't the fastest or couldn't jump the highest, Steve absolutely was elite in other ways. His footwork and coordination were possibly the best in the league, and he attributes this to the fact that he played several sports growing up, especially soccer. Nash has since said, I think one of the main reasons I've made it into the NBA is because I played soccer. Agility, reading the game and seeing things ahead, being able to analyze more angles and work on coordination. He also attributes the extreme rise in his level of play to his coach, Don Nelson. Steve has said, Don Nelson insisted that I score. I always wanted to pass the ball, but he said it's goddamn selfish when you don't shoot. Or if you're a dominant player, dominate. He insisted that I be aggressive. The growth was a turning point in my career. And turning point it was. In his 6th and 7th seasons in the league, Nash grew to become an NBA All-Star. Paired with fellow future Hall of Famer Dirk Nowitzki, the future looked extremely bright for Dallas. However, when it came time to re-sign Nash, the Mavericks instead chose to give that money to Eric Dampier, a man who would average 6.5 points per game in his time for Dallas. This is what Mark Cuban would call the biggest mistake of his career, but it was also some sort of destiny, because headed into the 2005 season, the NBA changed their hand check rule. This basically meant that stronger defenders could no longer use their hands to keep Nash in front of them. Combine this with the fact that Nash was now playing in the perfect system under Mike D'Antoni in Phoenix, a coach who revolutionized the NBA with his decision to play the 5 best players regardless of their position and to run and gun with his 7 seconds or less offense, and you can see why this was the perfect storm. Finally, Steve Nash would be unleashed and realize his full potential. Seemingly overnight, he went from an all-star level point guard to the back-to-back most valuable player in the NBA. As using the offensive firepower that Phoenix built around him, Steve was seen as the perfect quarterback for the clear best offense in the league. It's here though that we need to talk about why Steve Nash, a back-to-back MVP, is somehow underrated, because for whatever reason, since his retirement, Nash has been one of the most disrespected stars the league has seen. We see it on Twitter, we hear it from NBA legends like Shaq, who said that Nash stole an MVP from him. To put it simply, Steve Nash does not get the credit he deserves. He deserves to be seen as one of the best, and that's because his impact on the game went beyond the box score. As Mike D'Antoni has said, he showed what can happen when a great point guard has an open court and the freedom to make choices. When that happens, the game explodes. Yes, again, it was Nash that made these teams go. Put another all-star level point guard with a different play style in that system, and things just don't work as well. The Suns were an elite team during this time period because of Steve Nash. They needed a point guard who had one of the highest basketball IQs we have ever seen, who was one of the best passers in NBA history, who was perhaps the most unselfish star to ever play the game of basketball. In his first 6 seasons in Phoenix, Nash led the Suns to an average of 55 wins a year and made the Western Conference Finals 3 times. During this time, Steve himself was again a 2-time MVP, 3-time member of the first team All-NBA, 2-time member of the second team All-NBA, and 5-time All-Star. He, without a doubt, put together one of the most dominant stretches from a point guard we have ever seen, and he did so between the ages of 30 and 35. That is obviously a ridiculous age to have your prime, but it makes sense when you consider that Nash never stopped working at his game and never stopped taking care of his body. He was always that dedicated to be great. The only knock you could have on him during this time is that he did never make the NBA Finals, but really, was this his fault? For one thing, he never choked during the playoffs, as he averaged 20 points and 10.7 assists per game on over 50% shooting. If anything, the fault for Nash's inability to reach the finals lies on his owner, Robert Sarver. To put it bluntly, Robert Sarver is one of the cheapest men to ever own an NBA franchise. And in my mind, without a doubt, this cheapness cost the Phoenix Suns at least one NBA title. If you don't believe me, just listen to this. In the summer of 2004, when the Suns signed Steve Nash, they also traded their number 7 pick to Chicago for $3 million and a 2006 first-round pick. With this 7th pick, the Bulls took All-Star Luol Deng, and yes, Andre Iguodala was also available. Imagine an owner right now effectively trading away a top 10 pick for money. They would get destroyed by the media. But going even further here, after the 2005 season, a year where the Suns would lose in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals, Joe Johnson's contract was up and he needed to be re-signed. Keep in mind, Johnson was a 23-year-old who had just averaged 17 points per game and was the perfect type of player for Phoenix's system. It was a no-brainer to re-sign him, but unfortunately, Robert Sarver did not want to pay him. So instead of keeping Joe Johnson, a man who would go to the Hawks and become a 6-time All-Star there, the Suns instead agreed to take 2 first-round picks and Boris Diaw from Atlanta. If you're a Suns fan, I'm just sorry. And finishing this off, in 2006, the Suns used the Bulls pick they got back in 2004 and drafted Rajon Rondo. Sounds great, except Phoenix immediately traded him to the Celtics for $2 million and a 2007 first-round pick. Which means, if you're counting at home, Phoenix could have had either Luol Deng or Andre Iguodala, Joe Johnson in his prime, and an awesome backup point guard in Rajon Rondo. Instead, they would go on to lose in the Western Conference Finals another 2 times, and this is somehow Steve Nash's fault? What a joke. Seriously, Robert Sarver, if you are watching this, you should probably be calling Steve Nash on a daily basis, in tears, apologizing for not getting him a championship. Because yes, I hate making excuses for players, but at the end of the day, as an NBA player, there are certain things you just cannot control, and you can't control when your owner is selling off draft picks for money. Just ridiculous. But anyway, if you're still watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. I make videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday around 6 p.m. Eastern, so if you're new, make sure to subscribe. And if you're already subscribed, thank you so much for supporting. You're awesome, we all know it, and as always, have an awesome day, and cue that music.